Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Professional Builders Podcast, the Builders Ladder. Great to be here today. I'm joined with I'm a little bit starstruck. I'm a little bit fanboying. I'm joined by Lachlan Stewart. 58 marathons in 58 states over 58 days. Can you believe it, Lachlan? Good to have you here, brother.
So good to be here. I'm starstruck as well, and I have to comment the moustache.
I really appreciate that you noticed, because it took me a week and a half to choreograph this mustache. I thought to myself, what can I do to make this podcast episode extra special? I thought, I'm going to grow a mo just like Lockie's.
We get that. It's just that mo respect that you get whenever you are walking down the street or you're driving in your car and you pass another bloke who has a moustache. It's just that head nod and you're like, he gets it. He really does.
He really does. I totally agree. So for everybody listening, they might not know how incredible of a feat you've just accomplished. So let's give them a little bit of context. Let's give them like the 30-second what you've just done, and then we'll unpack what it took to get there and what you've done prior to the big milestone. So what have you just finished?
So I just finished 58 marathons in 58 days across all 50 states of America and all 8 states and territories of Australia. So the third person in history to do the 50 states marathon challenge in 50 days, the first person to do it in winter, and the first person in history to do the 58 to 58, which I guess I made up.
Yeah.
So it was
goosebumps.
I love that. That's what we want. We want some goosebumps. And you're probably the first person who's got goosebumps upon hearing it for the first time. Most people are like, is that actually possible? Like, did you do it? What went down with that?
It's wild. So I was the ultimate armchair supporter, like following on the Insta snaps and, basically from the comfort of my own home, but not an easy feat. So today I want to unpack the logistics that went into it, the mindset that went through it, and kind of like the pain and suffering that came out the other side, and what's next for you. But tell me, you can hang your hat on that 58 states, 58 marathons, 58 days, but you're a man before that as well. Tell me a little bit more about your background prior to doing that big old thing.
Yeah, it's just an extension of myself. I grew up wanting to be a professional athlete, and I think a lot of young boys maybe aspire to do that. Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate to get the opportunity to play rugby in France, and that was my first real taste of that happening. Got to live the life, got paid to do it, and it was awesome. And then I came back home and I realized that wasn't in my future anymore. And I sort of went through a bit of a rock bottom, because up until that point, I was one-dimensional. And what I mean by one-dimensional was I thought I was only an athlete, and the only value that I had in the world was as an athlete. And when that was taken away from me, I still wanted to be successful. I aspired to be successful because I thought it would solve all of my problems, the money problems, of financial stress. I thought it would make people like me more. I would like myself more, and life would just be better. And when I recognized that it wasn't going to happen for me that way, I'm like, do I go to university? I enrolled in 4 different universities. Do I get a trade? I ended up doing a trade as a carpenter, which is why we get, I understand the audience that we're talking to. But I was still always looking for more, like what was fulfilling for me. And rather than just trying to be the builder, or rather than just trying to be the athlete, or just try and be this one person, I realized in about 2014 that I was multidimensional, and all areas of my life were connected in some way, shape, or form. Mm. So regardless of what success looked like to me at that season of life, the direction that I was going to walk in, I had to make sure I wasn't neglecting the other areas. So I, after sport, I guess went through a number of relationships where I was the problem, and I got in a relationship with my now wife, and I didn't want to mess that up. And so I had to do some work, develop some skills, overcome insecurities, but I also had to be in a financial position where I could provide in the way that I wanted to. So I'm learning all these skills and understanding that I'm in a season of work needs to grow, which means I need to let my girlfriend at the time know that I'm going to be focused on work, and I will invest in date nights and things when it comes back. And then when that sort of starts falling behind, I had to go back and invest in the relationship or health. And that sort of made me realize that I wasn't one-dimensional, and it was all moving forward to that point. And I guess back on track with the question was, I started my own business, and part of that business was also fundraising for mental health, because it's something that I experienced negatively in my period, and I've lost friends to suicide. And I thought, raising awareness by doing things that made my life better would ultimately build community and help people start having those conversations. And that just continued to progress over the years from 12-hour challenges. My first one was Wadding for Living. I did a fundraiser with Living Foundation, and it was just a CrossFit workout. And every year I was like, let's raise more funds, let's get more people involved and continue growing. So I didn't just wake up one day, Owen, thinking 58 marathons, let's do it, and let's raise over $100,000. I rode 30 marathons in 30 days. I did a 50-hour overnight walk. I've done multiple things, and every time it's proved to me that I am capable of so much more than I originally thought.
So good. You've also done a marathon on a cruise ship.
Yeah. I always forget about that, but yes, I did do a marathon on a cruise ship, and I actually got a message from Richard Branson the other day, which was awesome.
I saw that. How cool is that? It's a
Very
bit
cool.
of a claim to fame. I'd be definitely putting that on my LinkedIn if I was you.
I should do that, actually. I will do that after.
Yeah, so good. So tell me a bit more, like you touched there on a few things, like the definition of success can be slightly different for everybody, and it can be different for different chapters and stages of your life. But how did you try and rebuild your identity from somebody that's been successful over here to being somebody that can be successful in multiple facets of life, like not just sport? Like how do you spoke about communication with your partner, but what else goes into rebuilding your identity?
For me, it was simplifying it. I don't like having complex things, or it overwhelms me. And from that, I get, I guess, paralysis by analysis. I don't do anything. And I believe the best way to change anything in your life, whether it's your identity or your outcomes and results, is by doing something.
Yes.
The act of doing something then solidifies and provides evidence that you are capable of doing things. And it also proves to you that a specific outcome leads to a specific result.
Yes.
So when I recognized that I needed to change who I was, I guess 2014, coming out of moving home from France, not really knowing what was going to happen in my life, I knew I needed to make a decision to have something to work towards. That decision, Owen, was earning $1 million. The reason why I thought $1 million was because up until that point, I always thought success was having $1 million. It would solve all the issues, the financial stress, everything that I mentioned earlier. From that, I then said, okay, well, I'm going to do that. How am I going to do that? I found a vehicle. I started selling supplements, knew a lot about health and fitness, and every action that I took stacked a small win or a small loss that was essentially a lesson and a small win. Yep. And I started proving to myself that I could change who I was. In order to do sales, you have to learn to communicate. You have to learn to help people think differently. You have to learn to help them see that maybe there is a problem in their life and there is a solution for that. And while initially that was to help me earn my $1 million, it started translate into other areas of my life. It started helping me improve my relationship with my wife. I had a lot of insecurities and a lot of, I guess, let's say, baggage that I brought to the relationship, that as I was learning to communicate better, we were opening up and I was able to tell her how I was feeling, what I was struggling with, and it made our relationship so much better. And these small wins, I started seeing my marriage improve. I started seeing my health improve. I started seeing my bank account improve. I was like, man, if I just keep doing these small things, they don't have to be big actions, but small things daily, I can improve whatever I want.
Yeah.
And that's when I had that first thought, or that thought for the first time, that as long as I have the ability to not quit and to problem solve and to be resourceful, I can find a way, or I can find someone who knows the way to help me get what I want from my life.
So good. Yeah. There's a couple of things there that I want to touch on because it really resonates with me. So there's that principle of be, do, have. Like, you're not going to have the stuff until you be the person you need to be, do the actions that are required to have the thing. So in this case, like $1 million, we need to you need to show up and be the person that deserves it. We talk a lot about delegating to elevate, or earning the right to grow. And that's about setting the systems and the foundation as both personally and professionally in place so that you can earn the right to grow. Don't have to go through that scar tissue the long way. You can go through it slightly faster, but you've still got to accumulate some of that experience and some of that scar tissue to be successful, quote unquote, at whatever level it is you're trying to get to. So that really resonates with me. And the other one that you mentioned there at the very beginning is that your self-worth isn't tied to your business. So I think a lot of tradies and a lot of business owners and a lot of builders in particular tie a lot of their self-worth to how well the business is going. bank account's full, fucking crushing it.
Life's
Here we
good.
go. Client A, B, C, D, E, F, and G all want me as the builder. Let's go. Sponsoring the local rugby team. Let's go. And then all of a sudden, pipeline dries up a little bit. Bank account gets a little fluctuation in it, and it's like, I suck. Like my self-worth is completely tied to my business, and that's a really dangerous place to be in. So how do you manage to, what strategies can people adopt to kind of like remove their self-worth from the thing that is their baby, like their business often?
I think it's understanding, firstly, there's going to be seasons, and you can build systems to help you throughout those seasons. But firstly, it's like when things are going well, you're not as good as you think you are.
And this too shall pass.
Yeah, this too shall pass. And when things are bad, you're not as bad as you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
So what that then helps me do is understand that I always need to be growing, and I always need to be preparing for the next season.
Yes.
Because it's the same every year. We go through summer, autumn, winter, spring. Life is going to do it. We don't necessarily have a specific timeline on when that is, but it happens. It happens to the best of us.
Mm-hmm.
And because we know that happens, it doesn't mean that who we are as an individual, especially outside of our work, is defined by that. Because I know a lot of incredible people, my dad included. My dad was a builder.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work for him, and he was an amazing dad. And he went through the worst possible thing as a builder, going through, close to bankruptcy and having heaps of issues. And I watched his self-worth be, literally tied to that, and it destroyed him.
Yeah.
And that's heartbreaking as a son to watch that, but also even more frustrating to know that this role that's, most of us are only in our careers for 40 years, let's say, that is defining who he is outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to be able to separate that, we need to also acknowledge the other areas of our life where we are successful. It's very easy, Owen, to go, work is a defining part of my life because it's tangible. The bank account is tangible. Other things that are tangible is maybe your weight, how much you lift in the gym, like there's specific numbers. As soon as we can start making tangibles in other areas of our life, like our relationships, with our self-worth, our social areas, we can then start rating it, and then we can go, hey, man, I'm earning $1 million a year. I'm fit as a fiddle at the moment. I'm benching 100 kilos. But according to my standards of success socially, it might mean going away with the lads once a quarter or doing dinner with your friends every fortnight. I haven't been hitting that. So I'm failing there. I need to start sorting that out, because then when it gives you another, problem to solve. And when we're solving problems or doing hard things, we're building our self-worth. We're building our confidence because we're doing things that we didn't think was possible. And that's how you start winning more consistently on a broader range of areas.
So good. So there's a lot of different directions that we could take that, but I want to unpack kind of like when problems do pop up, what we can do to tackle them. I'm a big believer of like own the problem, own the solution. So like turning a blind eye or not calling the problem out or turning in a different direction just allows the problem to build and become bigger. And by walking away from problems, we literally train ourselves to avoid them. Whereas walking into problems trains us to be better, rise to the standard, and take the attitude and mindset that when we own the problem, we get to own the solution, and we're in the driver's seat. And I much prefer being in the driver's seat than being a passenger to my problems. So you had a big one on your latest adventure. On day one, you cooked your toe and you pushed a little bit too hard. Or walk us through that. Like, you got an injury basically on day one, and that's a unforeseen problem that you ideally would have avoided, but you now have to tackle and address. So what goes through your mind, and what did you actually do?
Day one was supposed to be exciting. It was like the start of something great. I told everyone I was going to do this world first. I had a lot of sponsors on board. I'd also said I was going to raise over $100,000.
Yeah.
In the lead up to the run, we were in Alaska 3 days before we kicked off. We were doing some trial runs, getting used to the lay of the land, and it was quite icy. And people started saying on social media, you need to have snowshoes. I'm like, no, I don't. I'm fine. Anyway, after 3 days, I'm like, okay, maybe they know something I don't know. I'm going to go buy some snowshoes. So I did that. I didn't test them, and I decided to run a marathon in them.
And everybody that's run a marathon knows that the best thing you could probably do is to run in new equipment that day of the race, right? Like,
Exactly. That's exactly what you do for success. You don't test things.
yeah.
And 5K in, my toe just kept hitting the top of my shoe, and it was beginning to get a little bit irritating. But part of and myself and the guys that I were running with were like, we're doing a sub 4 hours to kick it off. We want people to be like, this is awesome. And so I ignored it. I ran the next 37 kilometers with my toe hitting the top of my shoe. And when I finished, I took my shoe off and my toe was already going black. And in that moment, I realized I'd made a big mistake. And it wasn't just, I guess, a physical injury. It was more the fact that I'd not listened to myself and I'd almost jeopardized the goal of 58 marathons by being stupid. You know, is the mental toll that really frustrated me. And what I realized in that moment, and a big lesson that I took away from that, not only for myself, but for my team and for people following along, was that in order to do something great, you have to have, I guess, a high performance mindset. And this goes for people listening to this. If you want to be an incredible builder and have an incredible business, you need to have a high performance mindset. And the, I guess, standards that you adopt for that will be different for every individual and every business based on what those goals look like. But the standards are what you must uphold in order to achieve that goal. Because when you uphold your high standard metrics, the people that are in your team or maybe work for you or who follow you will know whether you're doing that or not. And that's what inspires people to have their own high performance standards or not. It's why I can imagine, Owen, when people go to your workshops, there would be builders earning millions of dollars, some who are maybe earning hundreds of thousands of dollars. And those who are earning hundreds of thousands of dollars want to be around the ones earning millions of dollars to soak up how they think, act, and behave. And quite often, you'll realize that they're just humans like you are, but how they conduct themselves is a little bit different. Not massively different, but a little bit different. And in that moment, when I dropped my standard because I was so focused on this sub goal of doing a sub 4 hour marathon rather than being the diligent, disciplined individual that I am to, I guess, one, even get enough funding, media attention, and the ability to run the 58 marathons, I'd let that go for this one little, I guess, ego stroke.
Yes.
And my team even started going, why would you do that? Like, you know better than that. And because I'd emotionally allowed myself to the excitement of something to get in the way of, you know, the bigger picture. So the thing that I would get people to take away is when you're building your high performance, let's call it habits or the standards of what make you elite, is when emotions are high, intellect's low. And we need to be able to understand what emotionally triggers us. It could be the fact that you know you don't have the capacity to take on a new extremely big build because you already, you know, got a few builds on the run, your staff are run short, but the emotions run high because you're like, think about that profit. How good would that be? Yeah. Or someone wants to make a modification or an adjustment to a house and you maybe don't have the time to sign off on that, but you do it anyway, and then it comes back to bite you on the ass. When the emotions are high, the intellect's low. So when you're not sticking to your systems or to your holding your standards to the level, things can go wrong.
Yeah.
And so the first point is understanding, having the self-awareness to know when emotionally you're on, and that can be both positively and negatively.
Yes.
And two, when you start deviating from your systems or the standards that you have that make you as good as you want to be.
So good. When I've just written that down, when emotion is high, intellect is low. That's a very good reminder. And then, so what do you do? Like, how do you recognize that emotion is high and your probably intellect is going to be low? Like, what do you do when you recognize that you might be in a position where you're going to make a poor decision? Like, what's the best thing we can do?
So for me, I feel like I understand what my base standard is, like how I operate on a daily basis. I can tell if I'm speaking extremely fast or if I'm thinking about the future outcome too much. I know I'm emotionally getting heightened, and we all do that. Like we can do that in our relationships when we're about to get lucky, like the emotions go high. You can do it when more money's going to come across the table. You're thinking about how am I going to spend this, or what does that mean for my financial stability? And we start thinking about that rather than the logistics of what is in front of us. So in order to slow it down, if I don't necessarily know whether I'm emotionally triggered or not, I would say, hey, this sounds like it could work, but give me 24 hours to go away and review it, and I will come back to you. Because all we're trying to do is create a little bit of space to then allow our rational mind or our logic mind to come through, because we can go home And let's go back to the build example where it's like someone said, hey, I want a $6 million build and, I want it done in 9 months time or 12 months time. And you're like, oh, that's a pretty cool job. But then you go home and you understand you've got 9 blokes, you've got 3 jobs on already. You're the one who's managing the jobs, or maybe you have a few managers, but it might be biting off a little bit more than you can chew.
Mm-hmm.
You can then sit down and go, okay, let's weigh up the opportunity versus the risk. And you can then say, look, as much as I feel like I want this job, currently where I'm at is it's not, it's too much risk, and I risk putting myself in a bad position, which could jeopardize my business, which could jeopardize my stability at home, which could jeopardize my own well-being. So I'm going to have to decline. Or you get the alternate where you're like, I can make this work. How good? But then you can go back with certainty, and you know that you have a bit of a plan in place, and you've done the numbers, you've done the planning to make it possible.
Yeah, nice. I like what you're saying around creating space. So all of this is gold. There's a tool in sales that we often, you can often use around like why things are the way they are, and you're just kind of blaming the status quo. And to create that space, I've often heard people talking about like blaming the status quo. So like, hey, this all sounds great. It looks fantastic. I don't ever make decisions without talking to my business partner. I need to go and talk to my business partner or whatever. Like, this all looks great, but let me check with the team who will actually be doing the work on your project. Like, let me go and check in with foreman X, project manager Y, estimator Z. Because it helps to tie that team member into feeling a sense of ownership. It helps you to create that space. It gives the client a little bit of confidence that you've got a team and an infrastructure and a system in place that's not just, you jazz hands, hustle and muscle sort of thing. So I like that, creating space. And what I've seen successful people do is like often blame it on the status quo. Like, I have to check with my team. Sorry, I need to go through this method or this process before we go any further. This is just like how things are done. So that's gold. That's great. I want to understand a bit more about the challenge and about the 58 marathon challenge and what kind of logistics went into it. You touched on it a little bit just before there around like the sponsorship, the media coverage, ability to raise so much money. So walk us through that, like from idea to day one. What actually went into that, and how did you manage the whole thing?
Day one, I asked my wife, I said, I'm thinking about doing the 50 states marathon challenge initially. And she said no. And I was like, okay, I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I wanted to make it unique. So I started thinking I could do Australia and New Zealand. What would that look like? North Island, South Island. And it just got too complex with New Zealand because there were 16 regions, they don't have states. So I went Australia and New Zealand, and I went back to my wife and I was like, look, I can't stop thinking about this. Like, what do you think? And she's like, okay. She'd also been thinking about it. And she said yes, because we'd moved to Nashville for her career. And she's like, it'd be, rude of me to expect you to pack everything up and you support my dreams and me not do the same. I knew from that moment, I was like, there's going to be a lot of stuff that goes into this. Like, what does that look like? I got a whiteboard and wrote it out. I was like, okay, I need a team, because in order to make this as successful as it's going to be, I can't do this by myself. I can't coach. I can't do the PR. I can't do the driving. I can't do the cooking. I need a team.
Yes.
I then realized that it's going to cost a lot of money, because you're traveling, you got fuel, you got accommodation, you got food for 4 people. I wanted to document it. We're making a documentary, so I needed to pay a videographer, flights, all of that sort of stuff. So I needed to figure out a way to do that. And I thought, okay, sponsors are a great place to start with that. Then I had to go through like training, equipment, brand partnerships, all of that. And I just wrote the list down around what's obviously the most important. And from that, I just started tackling it one step at a time. I started telling people about what I was going to achieve. I started recruiting my team. I understood as an individual, I love my own space. So I needed to find the right people that I felt I could be in a van with for 50 days minimum throughout the US. I needed to find sponsors that aligned with what I was trying to achieve. So I started reaching out to all the ASICs and all of those, and they just kept saying no, until I got to a point where I was like, maybe this isn't going to happen. And then fortunately I started asking clients and we got it together. And from that, then I started outsourcing tasks to my team, because I'm like, this is a bootleg thing. I've never done anything to this scale before, but these guys believed in me. I'd done 30 marathons in 30 days on the roll before, which was a world record. I'd raised X amount of funds before. So they believed in me that it was possible. They just knew they had to help me. So we started getting the routing done, which my brother-in-law Liam did. He was the driver. He was organizing with a lot of PR and doing all the media while I was on the road. But he also sort of mapped out the route. What we had to consider, it's a world first and it's in winter. The reason why we chose winter was I travel a lot with my wife and with my work, and the only sort of free period we had was January to March because my wife started her festival run again in March and I wanted to be there to see that. So when we figured that out, we're like, okay, there's going to be snowstorms, blizzard, running in snow. It's going to be sub-zero temperatures for a lot of the time. How do you navigate that? And I'm sitting in Australia and Mexico between those two places most of the time. And you're like, well, I can't really train in that to figure it out. So we're going to just run the gauntlet here. And I, jumped on Google and all of that. And what ended up happening was I created a lunch with people that I wanted to sponsor me. And I guess, pitched the dream, which was, this is what I'm trying to achieve. This is why it's important to me. This is who we're raising funds for. This is how much money I think we need to make this possible. And I would love your support to make it happen. And within that lunch, we raised $50,000 for the charity and we got the sponsors sorted. So rather than trying to do it all single-handedly, when you get people in a room and they see who else is there, it built momentum because they were a part of something bigger, right? It wasn't just supporting Locke. It was like, we're supporting Locke together and, there's great synergies here. And that started to happen. And Liam in the background was doing the routing and realized, hey, we can't hit all the big cities. It's just not possible. We had to drive 12,000 miles. And every day you're dodging snow. We had flat tires. I was obviously injured. So I predicted I was going to run 4 hours to 4.5 hours per day for a marathon. That blew out to 8 to 10 hours when I was injured. So we're already running behind. So rather than hitting all these towns we just had to jump across the border and get going to the next town. And every morning was the same. We would wake up. So we had a system, which was and I'm so glad we didn't book ahead of time all of our hotels because we changed that. But the system then became wake up, check the weather, hope that a snowstorm isn't coming, run, get in the car, go to the next place based off the weather. And as long as we're moving forward, and literally across the top section, and we were a day ahead of a snowstorm the whole time, which was the best luck of all time.
Yeah.
But somehow we ended up pulling it off and didn't miss any flights. Logistically, coming back from America to Australia, we had what was called Hell Week, which was the thing that I was most scared about. Doing 4 marathons in 48 hours, flying from Newport Beach to Hawaii to Sydney, Australia, straight to Canberra, hoping that I wasn't going to blow out and run an 8-hour marathon or I wasn't going to have a flight delayed. And all of that, worked out because I was able to outsource responsibility to my team. They made sure that I was eating enough. There were days when I first got injured that we forgot our system. We forgot our routine of what I needed to be consuming every day, when I needed to be consuming it, to the point where I got dehydrated and I thought I was going to, pass out in one of the runs in the snow. But we got back on board and got back into that system, and Liam took control of that. Ben, who was our videographer, was doing more than he was paid to do and making sure that we would get it done. And then Etienne and Sam, who were the other guys with us, were also making sure that I was eating. I had my hydration with me. I was doing my recovery. I was getting my sleep. I was getting my content out there to fulfill the mission, and we got it done.
Incredible. There's a couple of things that are really resonated with me. So the first is it's often, this is a great book by, I think it's Dan Kennedy or Dan Sullivan. It's 10x is easier than 2x. And, look, I'm not saying this was easy. In fact, it sounds borderline stressful and psychotic. But what you've done is you've set a really big vision, and it's almost like the sponsors and stuff. Yeah, cool. That sounds great. And then when you set a really big vision that everybody else's visions can sit within, you're able to attract and have really talented team and partners. And we talk about this a lot with employee retention. So people don't leave bosses, they leave opportunities, right? So it's your job as the business owner to set a vision that sits everybody else's within it. So if they want to earn more money or have more responsibility or take more accountability or do bigger projects or do smaller projects or work independently or whatever. If you want to retain them, then your vision has to be big enough that sits their visions within it. And it's the same with like attracting these top tier partners and sponsors. Like you've got to have a big enough vision that gets them on board and gets them engaged. And just by having a bigger goal, it creates the momentum and the bigger piece of pie that allows you to have a team and a support structure. And then it being 10x bigger than just, 5 marathons makes it actually in some ways easier, than pulling all this together and trying to raise that much money through just 5 marathons. It's a bigger goal and it attracts larger people, better talent, all that sort of stuff.
There's two things with that. The first one is when you set something that's 10x what you think's possible, it's very overwhelming and it can be hard to, I guess, sell that vision to people unless you do the work. So when I first knew that I was going to do it was about, I think February last year, 2024. And I didn't know whether I was capable of doing it. I'd run 4 marathons in my life.
Sure.
I didn't know whether I was capable of raising the funds that I thought I'd needed. I'd never raised that many funds for sponsorship before. And there was a lot of doubt. And then even setting $100,000 as our fundraising goal instead of $1 million, because originally I was like $1 million, but then I was like, I don't think I'm capable of that.
Sure.
And over time, the more I started obsessing about it and thinking about it and problem solving, it became real to the point where I didn't think 58 marathons was big enough. I was like, I'm going to do that. And that was one of the, I guess, the downsides to it was I lost the wow factor to what I was actually achieving. A lot of people think it's amazing, and it is. But for me, I'm like, oh, it's nothing now. I need to do bigger. And I think
you've raised your standards, right?
Correct.
Like you've normalized, and that's what it's all about with being in a great community and things. It's about whatever you think level 10 is, that's somebody else's like level 5, right? And for better or for worse, you want to surround yourself with people that have like really big, ambitious goals, and it whacks your reality out of the, from where you thought a level 10 was. It's like, oh fuck, recalibrates that whole expectation. You've written previously that like there are moments that you feel like quitting and that they offer you the biggest opportunity to grow. Can you kind of unpack that quote a little bit, or give some specific examples when it played out during your challenge? Like when were you thinking about quitting, and how did it give you the opportunity to grow a little bit?
Definitely on day 5 jumps to mind. I was in West Wendover, Nevada. And at this point, my ankles, I couldn't do my shoes up. Both ankles were like ginormous and my shins were red and just they were super angry. And obviously the weather's -12. So when I got up that morning, I stepped outside and instantly pains just shooting straight up my shins and up my legs. And for the last 4 days, people have been saying, you've got compartment syndrome, you've got shin splints, you've got this, that, and the other. And I started ruminating on that, thinking, man, this might have done a lot of damage, or I could continue to do a lot of damage. And when I had my shower, got back in the van, I said to Liam, I was like, I don't know whether I can keep going. He's like, I was thinking the same thing. And I was like, okay, well, there's hills all around here. I'm not going to be able to run the hills, but there's a baseball field across the road. Let's just go around that and see what happens. Like, we'll be close to where we're staying if anything happens. Got out and straight away looked at my watch, and I'm doing 14 minutes per kilometer. My brain goes 14 kilometers, that's 4 kilometers now. This is going to take 10 plus hours. I'm in -12 degrees. Context, no one else is outside. In this temperature, people rug up, they run 10 meters to their car, crank the heater, drive to work, run straight inside, and are in a heated room all day. I'm now facing the fact that I'm going to be outside for 8 to 10 hours in that temperature. I had a lot of time to think, and I guess 90% of that time I was thinking about quitting. I'm thinking about, how am I going to tell my sponsors that I've failed? I'm telling myself, I'm beating myself up for on day 5 having to pull the pin on something that was supposed to be 10 times as long. I'm thinking about having to call the charity and say, I don't think it's possible. Like, I'm beating myself up and I'm embarrassed. But for some reason, I didn't pull the pin. I just kept walking. And I remember thinking, if I can just get down to 13.5 minutes per kilometers, then this is a win. I was trying to find those small wins that I was talking about at the beginning. Like, how can I stack a small win in this moment to allow me to go for a little bit longer? And every small win, every kilometer that ticked by, I kept getting closer and closer to the goal. And with about an hour to go, I'm sitting at 8.5 hours. Liam jumps out of the van. We had a motorhome and he comes over. He's like, "Can you answer your phone?" I was like, I had my phone on Do Not Disturb because I was already in a rough spot. And he's like, "Paul's trying to call you." Paul was our physio back in Brisbane. He's got on the phone and he's like, "Lockie, I've seen your Instagram post. See you're injured. Give me a rundown." Gave him a rundown, how angry my feet were. Every step was just shooting pain. My ankles were massive. And he asked me one question. He said, "Lockie, are you going to quit?" I had to think about that for a second because I'd been thinking about quitting all day. But when you're asked by someone outside of yourself, the answer was no, I'm not going to quit. What I'd also been thinking about was my next step is crutches. Am I going to get the crutches which you hold on with your hands, or am I going to get the crutches which jam under your armpits? And he laughed and loved that idea, but he's like, "Okay, well, since you're not going to quit, this is how we're going to treat you. Our goal is to get the inflammation down and they get you back running within the next 2 weeks." That phone call changed everything. That phone call saved the trip. Having someone in my network who understood me and cared about my mindset and why I was doing it and treated it as such, not just, put his medical hat on, which a lot of medical people would keep once again giving me feedback, enabled me to get the belief back that it was going to be possible to finish it. Because up until that point, that day, I'd beat myself up and I was really considering quitting until I had someone bring and breathe belief back into me. That changed everything. It changed how I was about to approach things, what I was going to do to get the job done. And from that moment, when I believe that if someone who is trained in this field, who works with elite athletes all over Australia, believes that I can do it and has given me a plan, a step-by-step on what I need to do, I'm going to follow that plan step by step to give myself the best opportunity to remove the inflammation and get back to running. And every day we stacked those wins from there on out until day 16 or 17, where I ran my first full marathon again. And what that gave me, so had I quit, I would not have become the first person in history to do that. I would not have raised over $170,000 for charity. I would not have had millions of people across all my social platforms be inspired by the resilience and what we pushed through to do. And so quitting in that moment was not just removing the pain. It would remove a lifetime of, even this conversation probably, of things that are going to come off the back of that. And so the ability to do something that was challenging, to push through even when everyone and everything was, and my body especially, was telling me to quit, has changed the course of my life. And that would not have happened had I not had someone in my network who knew what was going on, because I was documenting it. And I could guess, if you tie this into mental health, it means asking for help. One of the beautiful things about documenting on social media is people know what you're doing. If I'd have kept that to myself, I probably wouldn't have got that help. Right. But the fact that he cared more about me and what my motives were than what he thought I should be doing, that's what helped me succeed in everything that's come with it.
So good. Having a team that understand your goals and then can align the plan to your goals, rather than, like, we see this quite frequently where people will have gotten advice from an accountant or a HR professional who is operating by the letter of the law. And that's obviously fine.
Yep.
But often that's at the detriment to your business and ambitions and business goals. And I'm not suggesting that people break the law. But, for example, if we were to operate to the letter of the law, we often wouldn't have contractors in our trades-based businesses. Because if somebody's getting most of their income from a single source as a contractor, they're technically an employee, right? But as we all know, most of the industry operates as contractors, right? So quite often, like, an accountant or an HR professional can point us with some pretty mediocre advice and in the wrong direction, versus having somebody actually, in your instance, a physio that goes, well, are we achieving this goal or not? Like, if we're all in, then we need to work to the constraints that we've got, which is you're doing 4 to 10 hours on your feet every single day for the next 60 days, give or take. So we need to treat it with these constraints, and get you through that, versus going, no, well, splints pretty bad and you could really hurt yourself. Therefore, my recommendation is to stop immediately. And it's like, that would be the letter of the law advice, but that's terrible advice for your ambitions and goals and long-term success. So that's what I take from that, is that the team around you need to be curated and actually aligned to your vision, to your goals and understanding. And then no man's an island. Like, you don't get that help if you don't have a connection to a wider network, in your case, through social media. And, builders' cases, potentially part of a wider community, like a coaching group or a support structure, or the ability to pick up the phone or have people from your sub trades even that see and know you every single day. I think that's something that we see super frequently, is successful builders can often feel very isolated because they've outgrown their original network and haven't connected with other high-level business owners in the right circles. So, like, how do you, like, there's the social media, but how can people kind of like remain open to help? Because as shit gets hard, it's easy for us to often put our walls up. Like, how can we overcome things like that? What things can we put in place to better facilitate asking for help?
The easiest way I've found is, once again, I'm looking for people who have the results that I want. So when you go from being a builder, right, like you've been on the tools and now you're maybe looking to put the infrastructure in place to become a business and have people working for you, you're no longer the builder, unless that's the role that you want and you're going to employ the right people to run it. Okay, but you need to figure that out. But from that position, your problems change.
Yes.
Right. I used to hate going to work and swinging a hammer on a rainy day and, having smoke and all of these things that made me not a very good builder. And so I changed my industry and changed my problems. And as you're going through the rungs of becoming a business owner, and depending on the size of the business, you're going to have different money problems. You're going to have management problems, leadership, financial, like tax structure, all these different problems that aren't industry specific. There will be industry specific people that you can connect with, but there will also be, if you become a guy who's worth 8 figures, you need to start connecting with people who also have a net worth of 8 figures, because they're going to be able to, provide insights that are sometimes extremely helpful coming from a different industry as well. And going back to when I first said I wanted to make $1 million, I was 23 years old. I was a very poor communicator. I had no runs on the board around finances. So why would $1 million, and I said, I need to hang around millionaires because I need to understand how they think, act, and behave. Owen, do you think that a millionaire wanted to hang around a 23-year-old punk who had no runs on the board and no value to offer them?
Of course not. No, they'd pay to avoid you.
Shit, yeah. They would definitely pay to avoid me. And so I had to become someone who is valuable enough to be around those people. And in the journey of becoming that person, I outgrew my network at the time. So I've lived that, much like many people live. And it can be isolating as you're outgrowing one network and you're looking for the next network. We are so fortunate in the way the world runs today that there's groups like you have, Owen, and other, business meetups and various other things. It doesn't even need to be business related, where you can pay money to get into a group if you can afford that, or you can bring value to a group in a way if you have that value to offer. And then you get in the group and you get feedback from it around, is this the right place for me or is it not? And if you feel it is, it's going to help you fast track and overcome a lot of the problems that you're about to face, because every solution brings a new problem. They're not going anywhere, unfortunately, for everyone who hopes to have a problem-free life. So you need to be around people who have experienced that before, because there is going to be people who give you advice. They say advice is like assholes. Everyone has one. As a bit. So for me, when I look at getting advice from people, there's, I guess I break it down into two sections. There's advice while I'm going through battle. So when I'm going through the 58 marathons, I had hundreds of people messaging me about my injuries, doctors, physicians, all of that, right? And they're giving me advice from, as you said, from by the letter, this is how it goes. They don't understand me, what I'm going to do, how I feel about things. So I'm not listening to them. I'm listening to a select few people who understand those things that I mentioned about me and are going to support me to achieve that.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you've got pre-battle advice, which is like, I've never run 58 marathons. I'd never run 58 in a row. I'd never raised this much money. I'd never had sponsors. So I need to listen to people who've done these things to learn out how I can best achieve that goal. And so there's 2 times and places, I guess, for advice. But as you start to understand more about who you are as an individual, and I think the most important place to build from is knowing who you are, knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, knowing what you want, and then building a team, building an environment and putting yourself in a network that can help you achieve that.
Nice. So just on that, like, we've kind of talked about some of the stuff that I think relates, but I'll ask the question anyway. Like, as you're running, I think this is really relevant to how many of our members kind of go through and even like have to like maybe struggle with the mindset and where they should spend their time and attention. There's like being on the tools and there's running the business. And these are two different problems. These are two different skill sets. And, there are, maybe glass ceilings to both of them if you don't make a good transition between applying the skills to being on the tools or applying the skills to running your business. When you're doing your 58 marathons, it's the same sort of thing. You've got all this logistics and running the show stuff, and you've got the actual running that you need to do. It needs to get done. Just like building needs to get done. You can't really delegate that, but there's probably kind of like how do you decide which stuff you delegate, which stuff you hold on to? How do you kind of go through the mindset and the understanding of growing a business requires different skills at different stages?
It always starts with the objective and working backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So the 58 marathons was the objective. The raising of funds was the objective. I understood that my role in that was running and was doing the content because it was, I guess, a personal story and a personal experience. So they were the things that only I could do. Realistically, it didn't matter who was doing logistics, who was doing the PR, who was doing, obviously you want the right people, but you can find people for that. If I didn't get up and put one foot in front of the other, it's not happening. Nothing else matters. So I understood my role in it, and then I built the team around it. So I also wanted to do the running, I guess, to tie this into building and I guess being on the tools versus being a business owner. You can be the person on the tools, I guess, and you can build a structure around you where maybe someone manages you and tells you what you've got to get done for the day, if that's what you want, if that's what you love. But I would ask you, what's your objective for doing that? Because it could be quite stressful, right? Your objective might be, I want to earn more money. Okay, well, are there different ways to earn more money, or would you like to earn more money and not be swinging the hammer? Like, what is the objective and who do we need to get in place in order for you to achieve that? Because there has to be an element of you're enjoying what you're doing and also moving towards the objective.
Yeah.
I loved what I did every day. The team that I put together, I hope they told me they loved what they were doing every day. Like Liam loves organizing stuff and logistics and loves driving. Ben obviously is a videographer, loved doing that. And so they really thrived in that environment. And so we were all in our zone of genius, which is what made it work well, because whenever we face adversity, when I got injured, when we were faced with snowstorms, we would come back to what's the objective? To finish 58 marathons in 58 days in 58 states. What do we need to do in order to achieve that based on the people that we've got right now? It meant that Ben wasn't just filming. It meant that sometimes Ben was making me meals. It meant that sometimes Ben was going ahead to do the check-ins for the hotels, right? People would move a little bit outside their role because we didn't have we didn't have a million people, but we knew what the objective was. So I asked for more from people and they rose to the occasion because they also had bought into that vision as we were speaking about.
Yeah.
And it enabled me to focus on the thing that only I could do to achieve the mission.
Yeah. So good. So there's a few things here. One is we talk a lot also about your zone of genius and defining what success looks like for you. So whether it's to grow a $10 million construction company or $2 million construction company, we don't really care. Our job is to help you get there as fast as possible. And part of that is understanding what you want, what role you want to play, what you're good at and what you dislike doing so that we can delegate those tasks out to somebody that does love doing them. Because not many builders are put on this earth to send invoices, reconcile accounts, and do emails, right? But they love dealing with clients. They often love dealing on the design, the handover, the negotiation with different people and working with some clients and stuff like that. And the second thing that you've identified there is something that we call a WIG. So that's from the book 4 Disciplines of Execution, and it stands for Wildly Important Goal. It's a really fantastic book, and it helps to define and just dial in the wildly important goal. And in your case, it was 58, 58, 58, right? And you normally define a WIG by we're going from X to Y by when, right? So, and again, in your example, it's like we're going to go from 0 marathons to 58 marathons by this date. sort of thing. And there might be some pull measures as well. We're going to have to do it below a budget of X and by raising a figure of Y, sort of thing. And most people can feel like they are being pulled in all these different directions if they don't define their wig for their business, which is normally going to be something around time saving and profit drawing by doing projects A, B, and C, not D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, right? So what kind of work do you do at what margins, and how many of them are you going to do each year? And therefore, what team do we need to get really, really specific around the business that we're trying to build? Otherwise, you can be pulled in all the directions. You can go off track and you don't recruit and hire the team for the roles that you actually need. You go, oh, that guy looks great. Yeah, bring him on. And then turns out he sucks because he doesn't know how to use Build-A-Trend or can't really do bathrooms very well. You know, he's been standing frames his whole life, sort of thing, or whatever it might look like. Nice, that really resonates. So I think there's a couple of objections that might pop up from people listening to this. I'm sure there won't be many, but there could be some. And one key objection, anytime we talk about like physical challenges and things like that, is, you know, business is different. So like, for example, sometimes in business, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And sometimes in business, you need to not just push through, but actually fundamentally change something and course correct. How do you recognize when you're on the right path versus when you're kind of going down the wrong path? Like, you know, how can people kind of unpack that and take some of the lessons from just put your head down, one foot in front of the other, and just run through the pain, versus like, no, we're actually running through towards failure. Like, we need to change. Like, when do we make those distinctions?
Definitely. So obviously with a physical goal, the only way I could complete it was actually putting one foot in front of the other, regardless of how I felt. I had to tick the marathon off.
Yeah.
So even though it's just like grinding that out every day, when I finish the 42.2 kilometers, tick, we're one step closer to the objective. So progress is being made.
Mm-hmm.
When you're doing something that is not providing progress, meaning you're just spinning the wheels and there is no more feedback that you can take to improve things, I would suggest that's probably a good time to look at the inputs and start going, okay, well, what different inputs could I put in to get a different output? Because if we always go back to the objective as a business, so whether it's you're trying to scale your team or you're trying to go from building under $1 million a year houses to over $1 million a year houses, obviously it's like the finishing and the branding and the way things pull up moves you into that range, right? And so that way you're looking for different clients. So the outreach may be different, or the way that you market yourself may be different. But if you're still continuing to just take, I guess, the same, let's just use $500,000, even though that's like insane in today's society. But to get the house done, you're going to stay in that place. So you have to eventually try something new to start branching out. And it might only be one client a year that's over a 7-figure build, and you're still doing maybe 3 or 4 under that. But you have to start tweaking things to get the different result. And it doesn't matter whether the story of the physical challenges, the principles are still the same.
Yes.
You have to, as we've said, we've got to have the vision. We've got to then have the action steps that we believe create that vision. We've got to have the standards to uphold, to maintain the consistency in those actions, because motivation's not reliable, right? So it's like, how do you stay on top of your ordering? How do you stay on top of building company culture? How do you stay on top of the standards in your finishing of the houses? Like, how do you do all of those things? There's got to be processes. It's not just like, we just had a cool toolbox meeting and I'm inspired to do great craftsmanship today, but tomorrow I don't give a shit about it.
Yeah.
It's like, you just have to have a standard to uphold.
Yes.
And then obviously the team that goes with that to be able to delegate, because when you want to be more successful, it's going to require more than you. Like, you have to start outsourcing things, whether it is getting off the tools and getting in some great tradies, whether it is bringing in subcontractors, whether it is not wanting to do the invoicing anymore and getting a bookkeeper or a good accountant. Eventually, you've got to let go of things, but you've got to build a team who understands what you're trying to achieve, so you don't get, I guess, the same advice that everyone else does. You get advice that's tailored to what you're trying to achieve and your business.
Yeah.
And once again, I would bring that back to vision, and vision first starts by knowing who you are as an individual and what you want, and then being able to create that vision and work down that list.
So good. And it all yes to everything you've said, and then reviewing the data and closing the feedback loop. So like numbers is the language of business, and that just means that we need to be looking at feedback, which is, objective, not subjective, right? And that's like quite clear in that, have we got enough leads? What's our sales conversion rate at? Where's our margin going into a job at? Where's our margin coming out of the job at? Are we collecting enough cash to hit our break even? Are we collecting enough cash to hit our profit goals? And then tracking and closing the feedback loop on data rather than opinion, right?
Yep.
So that we can see if we're working in the right direction towards that vision, or if there's a constraint to achieve that vision, which is normally something that we can improve based on the data we receive. So all meetings should normally start with data. Okay, so what's next for you then? Like, how do you follow up with something like 58 marathons?
I learned, well, to your point, I've reviewed the 58 marathons and I believe it was successful, but I also learned a lot on how I can raise more money for charity next time, how I can also make it something that's part of what I get to do, because I love the experience of pushing myself and I love the adventure that it is. So with that feedback, I've got a meeting with my sponsors on next Thursday to go through that and share how the ROI for them and maybe ways that I can improve and we can do it better. But also the next challenge for me. And I'm tossing up whether it's a world first again, like something that hasn't been done, or I chase another record. Two of, pros and cons with both, but it will involve running across Australia. And with the feedback that I have, it's like, okay, well, and a couple of areas that we let ourselves down. I did mention earlier, like at the end of the day, you can always get people to fill certain positions, but you need to get the best people if you want to be the best and if you want to get the best results. And quite often, I wouldn't have that feedback had I not got the people in place that I had. So I don't, there's no regrets around that. It's the feedback that now I can take to grow, to level up.
Yes.
And so that's what I intend to do with the next one is, rather than raising just 100,000, or we did 170, it's like we're going for 1 million this time.
Oh.
I also understand from a media standpoint, a PR standpoint, where we can do things better. And so we're now going to do that, and we're not going to settle for anything less. Mm-hmm. I now understand what it takes from a team perspective to do it in the leanest possible way, so we can, do it as best as we can. And what the expectations are for people, how I can communicate that better from the get-go. And so I'm going to implement all of that on the next one. I'm very excited for it.
Well, I'm excited for you. Yeah, a lean, mean profit machine. High margin businesses win, and the same kind of applies to this outfit that you're putting together now. It's like making sure that you've got good margin, or in your scenario, like good, a ratio between funding to overhead, so that you can actually, win, which is spend more on promotion that gets more donation, or whatever it might look like. So sounds exciting. I love it. I can't wait for the pleasure to participate in the next one. So good. So what would be kind of like the one thing that, after hearing this episode, most of our members should go away and implement today? I've got 3 that I want to share, but I want to hear your one as well.
For me, it has to come down to understanding you're capable of more, but you have to decide what that looks like. Everything that I do and everything that I talk about and everything that I believe comes back to you. So if you're unclear, the people in your business are unclear, your clients are unclear, you need to gain clarity around what it is, or what your definition of success is, because then you can make the best decisions moving forward in order to achieve that. So I hope that through this, that's one thing that people take away, because that will help you understand how much profit you're looking to make, the team that you need to build, where you will need to delegate in order to achieve that. So that way the journey becomes as enjoyable as possible along the way.
So good. I'm going to add 2 that I don't think we've spoken about, but I see you demonstrate really well in this interview and in what I've seen you do previously. And it's the language that you use. So you talk very deliberately. You use a lot of phrases like I am going to, I am. And I am is some of the most powerful language in the English dictionary, because, like, for example, when you say I am going to do something, you stake a flag in the ground and you hold yourself to that standard. It'd be like saying I am not a smoker. You kind of identify as being somebody that doesn't do that sort of thing. Like, do you do math? No, I don't. So I'm not even going to dabble in the thing, right? I am this, I am that. And you say it a lot. Like, I'm going to run 58 marathons. I'm going to do a run across Australia. I am going to. And it's a very, very strong mindset that then trickles through everything else that you do. You use the words I am a lot, and it really stands out for me. And the other one that I'm going to loop back to is like that be, do, have, because you cannot have if you are not showing up with the standards that we've already spoken about and actually doing the work. So I love it. I love it a lot. Where can people follow you? Where should they go? What's it all about from here?
Yeah, so all platforms is just check out the Man That Can project, or social media is Lachlan Stewart, because I document everything that I'm doing. So one of the big things now, and going back to be, do, have, and the reason I wanted to have a month from when I finished the run to now, because I needed to think about all the stories and experiences and the lessons that I could take from that, but also how I can tell it in the most impactful way. Every day I've been writing, and I think you've been reading it, writing a blog about an experience and what I learned and frameworks that you can take, because that has helped me be able to tell my stories better. There's a few times on this already that I'm like, I rambled a little bit here. I wasn't as concise. And part of doing these big adventures is my goal, which I've been, my business for the last decade has been inspiring men to see that they're capable of more. Me doing what I do and the stories and pushing myself is part of the opportunity that I get to share that, which means I have to learn to speak better. I'm very fortunate I get to connect with thousands of people all around the world, but I still want to be better. So I'm going to go away from here, with this feedback and watch this podcast probably 10 times and learn how I can be more clear and more concise, so that when I'm doing more keynotes or more podcasts, I deliver it in a better way for people to feel the emotion, feel inspired, take action, and change their life.
You're an absolute legend, Lockie. You're setting the standard. I absolutely love it. And cannot wait to see, hear, and do more with you over the coming months and years. Here's your success, brother. Well done, and thank you for showing up for us.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. And the questions that you asked, as I said, not general, they're very unique, and I've enjoyed answering them.
Love it. Loved having you on the line. Thanks very much, dude.
Thanks, bro.